to a policy that's generating a lot of controversy in Worcester and beyond. Many first learned about it in a Globe magazine article on what writer Elizabeth Gehrman referred to as Ray Mariano's up by your bootstraps agenda. The program requires, with a couple of exceptions, that at least one adult from each of the city's families' public housing apartments to either work 1,200 hours a year or attend school full-time or get out. Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito says the Baker administration would like to take the plan statewide. Joining me to talk about this are the man behind the plan, Ray Mariano. He's the former Worcester mayor, current executive director of the Worcester Housing Authority. Good to see you. Libby Hayes, executive director of Homes for Families, an advocacy organization for the homeless. Great to see you too, Libby. So what inspired this thing, Ray Mariano?
Well, I'm a resident of public housing. I spent 20 years of my life, oldest of 9 children, growing up in public housing, and over time I spent a lot of my energy trying to help families in public housing be as successful as my family has been. I became executive director of the Housing Authority, and I went out and spent a lot of time cleaning it up. We reduced crime by 60%, vice crime by 90%. We fixed all the buildings. We did all the things we were supposed to do, and then we started to look inside the buildings, and here's what we found. We found that 80% of our families were unemployed. The adults were unemployed. 40% didn't have a GED or a high school diploma. More than 50% didn't even have a driver's license. And in Worcester, we don't have the T. You need a driver's license to go and get anywhere.
But why was it your responsibility, at least as you saw it, to fix this? No one's suggesting the problems don't need attention. Why are you appointed the man to fix with the plan?
Because nobody else worries about those families. For most people, if those families, our families, families like me, stay quiet and sit by themselves, they don't complain a lot, they're happy. It's unacceptable. In any other neighborhood, you'd have congressmen and women screaming, 80% unemployed. Barack Obama loses at 8%.
What happens to a single mother who has no child care? She have to go out and get a job or do education too?
Well, actually, she can go to school right on the property with us.
So what's wrong with this idea? I mean, it seems to me the one thing Ray Mariano didn't say, there's so many people, thousands of people want to get into public housing. Well, if people there, they stay homeless or without an apartment, this provides not only jobs and opportunity for people, but turnover. Isn't that a good thing?
Providing the opportunities for people to get ahead for turnover is excellent. I don't think there's no concerns
with that. So
what's
the problem?
The problem is the mandate. And the problem is taking a small program, which has done a great job building a program, building the partnerships, and taking that to a larger statewide issue and not dealing with some of the systemic issues that trap families into poverty, trap families into public housing. Like the lack of childcare that you mentioned before. Our wait list for childcare is 23,000 families on it. We also see transportation issues, like Ray had mentioned, and cliff effect is a big issue that we see. Cliff effect is when we see families that increase their income, and as their income increases, they end up losing benefits before they're able to make it, and results in a net loss.
Don't some of these have legitimacy, Ray?
Oh, they're all very legitimate.
So how do you deal with them?
There are 100 reasons not to do it. There's only one good reason to do it. What we have now is a system that's an abject failure. 4 or 5 more generations of the same family stuck in public housing because it perpetuates itself. It's kind of a perverse legacy that parents hand down one generation to the next, and the children that are there, as bright as any other and as talented as any other, don't think that school is important. They don't have the role models. They're more likely to know somebody who's been to prison or been arrested than someone who's had a full-time job.
Why not voluntary, though, with incentives? Why not do what she said?
That's exactly what we did. That's exactly where we started. And I was convinced that the voluntary program would work. We put all
Why didn't it?
Nobody signed up. And the few people who signed up, most of them dropped out. So then we said, okay, listen, here's what we're going to do. Jim, you've been on the waiting list for 4 or 5 years. We've got 10,000 people on the public housing waiting list in Worcester. You've been on for 4 years, and you're homeless. We're going to give you a chance. We're going to put you at the top of the list. If you agree, voluntarily agree, that you're going to participate in this program.
What happened with that?
7% of the people said yes, and 93% of the people said, no, I'd rather stay homeless.
So if voluntary doesn't work, and your goals, I think, are the same, good education, jobs, that sort of thing, how do you bridge that gap, Libby?
I think one piece is to get pushback on the voluntary doesn't work. I think we see lots of programs that are voluntary that does work. I think what we...
You can't find one. Libby, you can't find one.
That we work with a lot of them. We're getting together in Worcester next week.
Let her finish and then you can respond, Ray.
Which I invite you to come to. It's families from shelters from across the state that are coming together to talk about these very topics. And what we see is families that want to work, want to get ahead, want to provide for their families, but when you see the systemic issues that get in the way, that create disincentives, that get discouraging, that create barriers, it's not necessarily a carrot or a stick, but how do you create a pathway without obstacles that families can get ahead?
What percentage of people who are in public housing who have fit into the non-exception categories, like a disabled person or an older person, I know what they're, what percentage of people have actually complied with the program?
4% of the people voluntarily asked to participate in the program.
Forget voluntary. I'm talking about the mandatory program. What percentage of people have ended up going to school, ended up getting a job? How well is it working?
Well, we've doubled the number of people employed. We've tripled their wages. We've tripled the number of people attending school. We're now about 80%, 75 to 80% people employed.
Have you evicted anybody?
No, not one. Our program is...
Well, if you haven't evicted anybody, why do people think that mandatory is mandatory? I mean,
well,
it's almost like, why not try voluntary? If you're not going to evict them, then there's no stick to go with the carrot.
We will evict them, but we haven't. You asked me, have we? And we've designed...
Will you really? You really will evict?
You don't know me. Yeah. Trust me when I tell you. Look, I go to work every single day. I have a mission. I see our buildings are on fire. We have people in those buildings that nobody else is going to help except me. And good people like Libby, with the very best of intentions, say, well, we've got to solve every single problem until we can make sure that nobody has a difficult time.
Why were the feds for this before they were against it?
You'd have to ask them.
Well, I read what you said. Well, say it here.
Well, what I took...
You said they were incompetent and cowards.
No, I said they were one or the other.
Oh, excuse me, my apologies.
They either didn't read the plan, they approved it and didn't read it, which is most likely what happened. They approved it 3 times over a course of a year and a half.
Why not a pilot program? Even if your concerns have legitimacy about the cliff effect and all these other things, why not a pilot program? And if it works, then let the Baker administration expand this around. I mean, the potential seems to be huge. The only thing separating you two is voluntary versus mandatory.
I think the pilot program and developing the program like he's developed that has the partnerships that's able to...
Mandatory.
Not the mandatory piece is the part that...
Why not try mandatory in one setting to see if it works?
Like he said, he's not evicting anyone. So it's you have, and all of the different rules...
But he says he plans to.
Well, we've designed a program that if you try, Jim, if you try, we're going to find a way to make you successful. We're going to make it work for you, given your unique set of circumstances. Here's what we, by the way, we have a study from the School of Public Health from Boston University that's tracked our residents and similar groups of residents. It'll tell you, and we're going to release it next week, conclusively, this program is a huge success. What we want to do now is we want to expand it to 4 or 5 other housing authorities around the state to see if the model in Worcester, which we know works, will work in Taunton.
You two going to meet and see if you can work out your differences?
Well, we're going to meet, but I doubt that she has a legitimate point in that she worries about...
That was a yes or no question. You didn't work out your differences?
We're going to meet, but she's never going to agree to the mandatory program.
Ray Mariano, it's good to see you. Libby Hayes, pleasure.
Thank you.
Meet, see what you can do. Let me know.
All right.